and I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat.
They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
You think that things are not calm in Vancouver. Have you seen the state of the Calgary Flames lately? That's not calm. That is Anyway, welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, Twitch.com Shifts and Pucks. Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network, as we are live following a legendary performance that from Hillary Knight. Sean got her 100th and 101st point and a hat trick to lead the U.S. to their first women's goal since 2019, defeating Canada in their own backyard 6-3. First of all, how are you?
I'm doing great, Kev. It was a nice day here in Calgary where spring is attempting to make an appearance. So it's been up and down weather-wise here, but yeah, it was a great day. We went for a little bit of a walk and checked out a new brewery/distillery restaurant just in the neighborhood. So yeah, and then came back and watched the Women's World Championship gold medal game, and yeah, it was Canada versus the U.S. in women's hockey, the best rivalry in sports. It didn't disappoint.
No, but I'm seeing a few tweets about the bad call on Brianne Jenner that led to the power play goal, and I can understand. I can hear Tyler in our head saying, you don't put yourself in a position to have that call. But not only that, Canadians had a 5-on-3 power play. They had a couple of other power plays before that. They couldn't take advantage of their opportunities, and the USA did. And Hillary Knight put herself into already in legendary status, put herself into higher legendary status. Probably one of the greatest female players to ever play the game. And she led the U.S. As clutch can be, and U.S. deserves full credit for the win. Congratulations.
We'll get you next year.
Yeah, they'll be back against each other again next year. But I think the other nice, just quickly on the other nice thing about that tournament is we actually this time seem to have gotten some better hockey from some of the other teams. Switzerland made some strides. Other teams are starting to make some strides. So this tournament,
Sweden gave Canada a scare.
Yeah. So so certainly the hockey, like the play around Canada and the U.S. is getting better. So it's fun to watch. It's unfortunate they don't get regular play, but that's a whole other issue there that we'll get into. And yeah, but we'll do a playoff preview here a little bit later. We'll have some discussion about the Hart and Norris, but our primary conversation is about the Calgary Flames. They had their locker clean out on Friday. The Canucks did theirs on Saturday. And by the way, just for those, Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford and company will speak to the media on Monday. We haven't heard from the coach and the general manager of the Flames. We'll get into that in a second. But just overall, My impressions of everything, just in terms of the player, I think that there so many more storylines came out of this media availability than we had at the end of the season on Monday. It felt like we pretty much entered a pretty new era, even though some things were said that I don't think I was surprised by as much. But let's start with the big two. There's three that I really want to spend some time talking about. But let's start with Michael Backlund. It was the pause heard around the city when he was asked if he wanted to be back. He is, of course, a UFA. 34, wants to win a Stanley Cup. This was a guy that was drafted by the current coach of this team in 2007. He's been in this organization through part of the Iginla era, part of the Kiprusoff era, part of when Jay Bodemeister, Robin Regier, and Dion Phaneuf were patrolling the blue line for the Calgary Flames. He's seen the ups and downs of this organization. He was part of the Find Away Flames. And to hear that sigh, Sean, that was, I have anything that was said this week at that play, that pause told me more where the organization is more than anything else. And
well, yeah, I think it's after what was a tumultuous season, a season of more drama than you thought would have been, and they just couldn't find a way to get the wins when they needed, and they couldn't find a way to win enough close games. So, and now you throw in, like, does Backlund think that the Flames can turn this around? That they can, if they play like this, but they get the bounces, can they be a contender next year? I think that's where that pause is and comes from. Is I don't think he does.
Yeah, he certainly doesn't seem to know, and it just and it's impactful because I think there's a lot of people. There's, when we talk about who was wearing that future C with the Flames, I think Michael Backlund is definitely one of the guys that you're at least considering. And
see, I'm not.
Well, I think that just from the fans' perspective, I don't think that he would be the guy. I don't know if I would be picking Michael Backlund as wearing the C, but
because it's a Canadian market, and he's old for an NHL player. He's not a star player. If the Flames were playing out of Atlanta, if they were playing out of the States, out of a so basically a non-traditional market, you could get away with that because it's not as big a deal. But in Calgary, in Canada, it's a massive deal when that letter gets put on the chest of a player, and you need to get it right, and it can't be a short term. I don't think. If you're the Flames, I think you should be looking long term, and I don't think there's a candidate out there that has stepped forwards to claim that letter right now, and I don't think you need to rush it.
No, I don't think you need to rush it either. But I mean, just from the perspective, but my point ultimately with Backlund is this is a guy that has given his heart and soul to the Flames organization. Not a superstar. I agree with you. I don't even think that the Calgary Flame fan base has truly appreciated the work that Michael Backlund has given to this team. I'll say this again. I've said this before. Matthew Tkachuk is not the player he is without Michael Backlund. Matthew Tkachuk may not say it, but I think Matthew Tkachuk deep in his heart knows it. But for him to say that, to me, just amplified the dysfunction that's going on in this organization. and he knew that he had to make some pretty significant decisions. And ultimately, I mean, there's so many ways that you can go where this season went right or wrong. But there's, you could say that they lost a lot of 1-goal games because they didn't get a goal or they didn't get a shot. All of that. They were ultimately eliminated. Really, the death knell was that loss to Chicago just before the game in Winnipeg. They lose 3-1. They don't put in an effort. Nazem Kadri one-hands the puck as a pass. They don't beat Chicago at all this year. They had a business trip they had a professional trip in Columbus, as Daryl Sutter called. A lot of these teams that they should have beat and they feasted on last year, they didn't. So I guess I can understand where Michael Backlund's coming from. I don't know where you are in terms of assessing where this team is. Are they, 1 goal away if they find? Is it easy to bounce back? I can't say yes or no to that. So I think that was telling. And then Elias Lindholm, a guy that was a Selke candidate last year, second to only to Patrice Bergeron, part of one of the better lines in Calgary Flame history, probably one of the better lines in a short time of work in 2021-22. He doesn't express a heck of a lot of interest in coming back. And I mean, just in terms of player, there's no question that Elias Lindholm would be a massive loss to the Calgary Flames. Just the amount of things that he does in terms of not only offensively, but defensively, and the way that he carries the load. Was he as productive as last year? Of course he wasn't, but that still would be a massive loss. And that, to me, those comments were scary enough to me.
Well, yeah, you've got that, and arguably dependent, and someone who's been, he's at best on a contending team, he's a third line center, but he's a leader. He's someone that lengthens the depth of the roster, and a heart and soul type player in Michael Backlund. So if you got those two questioning, it's going to take a lot of convincing for either of them to sign going forward. So Backlund's got a lot shorter of a runway to win a cup than Lindholm at this point. But yeah, it's going to be tough for whoever is in charge of the Flames to try and convince at least one of them to stay, and then to get enough value back to help them retool, rebuild, or whatever the Flames do going forwards to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the third one that kind of took me, and we don't hear this, and we don't hear a lot of players talk about buildings, but Mackenzie Weegar flat out said that the Flames need a new building. And it's very rare to me that a player would strive into that, but this is a guy that he's a new player. He signed 8 years. For him to say something about that, I think was also quite telling. He's been in this league for a while too, so it's not like this guy is coming out of junior with some, hot shot, hot take. This is a guy that has played in rinks around the league, and I think we all know the captain obvious that the Flames need a new arena, but I think just hear that from a player's perspective, where they're at is also. This is where this took me when I heard this from Mackenzie Weegar. Maybe I'm off base. The leadership in this organization, whoever is the leader of this organization, there seems to be a lack of it. in terms of building, in terms of direction, in terms of philosophy, in terms of vision. I took all of this to mean I don't know what the Calgary Flames. What is the objective of the Calgary Flames ultimately? Like, what is the goal? Like, are they trying to win the Stanley? Like, I mean, they're spending a bunch of money to get to the cap, but like, this organization right now doesn't feel like a well-run professional organization. Like,
Well,
I
I think
just
they
go ahead.
it is, I do think, yeah, there is a lack of cohesiveness and direction within the leaders of this franchise, whether it is the owner, the GM, or whether it's owner, GM, or coach. I think they get based off of what a lot of the talk is and all the rumblings. It sounds like there was a rift in terms of how to approach dressing a roster and playing time between the coach and the GM. And I think that you're right there, Kev. I think it is. What is the objective here? What type of team are you trying to build? Because as much as the summer of Brad, as it was dubbed, felt really good on paper, I think this season's proven that it wasn't that the players that they brought in weren't necessarily a great fit for the coach and the style of play that he wants to deploy.
Yeah, that's it. It felt ultimately like he put a lipstick on a pig in a lot of ways. And it's no disrespect to Jonathan Huberdeau. That's no disrespect to Mackenzie Weegar, Nazem Kadri. It just like it felt like now you look back on it and it seemed a bit desperate.
Well, he was put in a tough position, and we don't know what the mandate that he had to like managing up. We talked as a podcast that has followed the Vancouver Canucks over the past 2 to 3 years. A lot of the talk going into Jim Rutherford's regime was managing up to the ownership and making sure that they are able to build a cohesive approach going forwards, top down. And I'm pretty sure it's apparent that the Flames don't have that. We don't know what based off of what Brad Treliving did last summer. I think we can piece together that the mandate was to make sure that they could put together a playoff team this season. Because if it wasn't, then I would say that the Tkachuk deal would not have been for Huberdeau and Weegar. They would have gone more future heavy on it. They wouldn't have gone out and gotten Nazem Kadri and signed him at Nazem Kadri as a over 30 player in a league that is getting faster every year to a long-term contract where you know that he's not like he's making $7 million. Like it's going to be tough for him to live up to that contract. Let alone Jonathan Huberdeau, who's 29 now, and they've signed him to a deal that starts next season at 10.5. So, yeah, I think the question marks of what is like. I think this is always the thing for teams who are in this mushy middle, in terms of what direction do you want, and there's always especially right now where there's so much information about all the prospects out there, and you've got scouts out there who provide a lot of information to the average fan, and they get excited about these young players. It's easy to say just rebuild. But when you're trying to sell, but the other issue here is who hired Sutter? Who signed Sutter to that contract? Because I think I've heard rumblings that that wasn't a Treliving decision. He was informed of it, and he basically had to say, okay. And then it really feels like the power balance is off kilter, because Brad can go out and get all the skilled players he wants, but if Daryl's not going to play them in spots that will make him successful, or give them a longer leash to find their game, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and that was the friction and the battle, and especially, I mean, the obvious one here was Jonathan Huberdeau, who, for most of the season played on his wrong wing. The other part of the season he played with Milan Lucic. God love Milan Lucic, but not in a top 6 role. I mean, this was a guy that came into the year saying that he was going to help Elias Lindholm lead the league in scoring. He had, and Jonathan Huberdeau did not forget how to play hockey. You saw that in the second. Like, he's still an incredible passer. He's still a great playmaker. Does he have some defensive liabilities? Yes. Does he need to shoot the puck more? God, yes, of course. But he's still a really good hockey player. So, that was one. But ultimately, to me, the criticism I will take with Daryl Sutter, one of my biggest is it's that, but the handling, the absolute mishandling of not only Jacob Pelche, which was, I think, significant, and not having him play the last 10 games of the year, based in part, it sounds like, because of a poor play he made in Arizona. And sticking around with Nick Ritchie, that was one. But let's also not forget the way that they handled Matthew Phillips. He got 2 games. He barely played. When he didn't look completely out of place, but it just felt like this was Daryl Sutter's way. And it goes back to the debut of Jacob Pelche. That was one of the best games the Flames played all year. They beat the 3-time Stanley Cup finalist Tampa Bay Lightning. And what you come out of that game is not talking about that game against Tampa Bay, but what Daryl Sutter said about Jacob Pelche after. And I do think it rubbed some veterans the wrong way. I do think it rubbed Kadri and Huberdeau specifically the wrong way. And I think that there was a ton of lost respect for Daryl Sutter in that room. And I think they started to if they weren't on the process of turning him out, it's either started it or they had enough.
Yeah, well, whether or not that was the catalyst for the dive of the Flames in the standings, when you look at how they performed after that, there was a massive drop off in terms of them being in the playoff race. And even though his contract, like Daryl's new contract starts next season, like, I do, like, even if you're the ownership's a Sutter fan, you have to look at this season and wonder what the hell happened. And if I think it's a 2-year deal, and this is an ownership that hasn't in the past been willing to spend money on head coaches. So if you're replacing Daryl, they're probably going low budget. They're probably just promoting whoever the coach of the Wranglers. Is that enough? And if they do that, is that enough to keep Brad Treliving, who was it Kev, you were saying before we went live that there's been reports that he turned down a contract extension at the beginning of the season.
Well, the wording was he punted. That's so. I don't say. I mean,
he didn't turn it down, but he didn't sign it.
Yeah, he didn't sign it. Now, there's conflicting reports on what Conroy and Maloney did. There's some that have said that he did sign an extension. I've also heard rumors that they did not. So let's leave that up in the air. But Tree Living, we haven't heard it. We haven't heard from Tree Living since the trade deadline. Yeah. So where do we start here? Let's start with. I mean, I guess to me. Let's answer the. This is okay. Let's start here. I think ultimately this is where I'm kind of coming from, Sean. I think, I like Pride Tree Living. I think he's a wonderful human being. I think he's done a lot of he's been navigated this organization through very tough times. But I also think that's some very legitimate criticism. Did he defend Jacob Pelche? Ultimately, I don't know that for sure.
Not publicly.
No, and I just have to question his role in the handling of Pelche, Phillips, and Ruzicka. Did he put his foot down, or could he put? I don't know that whole situation, but I don't think he's above criticism for this. I think most of the errors this year that the Flames were put in were mostly, I would put 60% on Daryl Sutter. We'll address the other 40% here as we go on. To me, my conclusion is I think both need to go. I don't think that one should stay and one should go. I think you have to bring in a new voice in the general manager chair and a new voice in the coach's chair. I don't think that that's what's going to happen, but I think that if it's me, that's where I would go. Now, I think there's a lot of people that have clamored for Mitch Love to take over for Daryl Sutter. I'm not one of them because I just, it's pretty easy and simplistic to assume that someone is going to have success in the AHL is going to completely come into the NHL and succeed. Again, that is, not a coach, but I can't. That's not easy for that to happen. I would personally be keeping Mitch Love in the organization in some way, shape, or form, but I wouldn't put him as the head coach of the Flames. If I was a GM, my clamorization, I've already said it, the coach I would be looking at is Andrew Brunette, who found a way to unlock Jonathan Huberdeau, who found a way to unlock Mackenzie Weegar, who you've signed for, as Devin, I'll use Devin's term here, 8 years. You got to make sure that they're going in some way, shape, or form. So that's where I would go with Andrew. Andrew Brunette would be a guy I would consider. But ultimately, to me, I don't think that you can come back with either of them. I think both have made their mistakes. I think, will Brad Tree Living get another job quickly? Yes. But I think we need I think the organization clearly needs a fresh set of eyes onto what exactly to do here.
Yeah. I agree with you what you said about Tree Living and how he's navigated a lot of tough situations pretty admirably. I have been tough on him in the past on this podcast, and I still think that I don't think he has received enough criticism in the past for some of the moves that he made. But he has done a good enough job to sort of keep himself employed throughout the last little bit. But you're talking about a team that has not made the playoffs 2 years in a row under his
Well, no, they made the
guidance.
playoffs last year. It's been on
2 years
off.
in a row. Haven't made the playoffs 2 years in a row.
Oh, I see what you. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So, yeah, I think I think getting some fresh eyes in there would be important under the assumption that they're allowed to. Yeah, if you can get rid of both, then you might be able to start fresh. I don't see that happening. The more that this goes on, and how quiet it's been, and I think it's going to be someone of the AGM stepping up, becoming the new GM of the Flames, and they're basically going to be Daryl's puppet, which I don't think is going to turn out very well for the Flames. But yeah, and what if you could, Kev? Like, you've got Andrew Burnett sort of picked as who you would go after as a coach. Who do you? Is there anyone out there that you would go out for for a GM to replace Brad Treliving? I mean, it's tough because you don't know who's available and who would be made available.
Yeah.
And who would the ownership would be willing to go after?
I do think they need a younger. I've heard the name Brian Burke tossed out there. I don't think that works.
Bring Berkey back?
Can you imagine Brian Burke and Daryl Sutter together?
Oh, Burke would get rid of him pretty quickly, I think.
I think he would too. I think that would be.
I think that would be a condition. That would be a condition of him taking the job, is that Daryl would be gone. Because I just don't. Because again, if you look at how this season has gone, that's the biggest. When you have these conversations about replacing management, it's always tough because, like, who's out there? But there's always someone, and I'm not saying there's not someone who can come in and fix this for the Flames, but it's just there's a lot of AGMs out there who would be like everyone that you've got with the you've got Carolina's AGM that I think is very highly thought of. You've got Sakic is not the GM, right? Yeah,
no, it's Chris McFarland now.
Yeah,
yeah.
But the other question, Kev, is realistically, what do you think the route forward is for the Flames? Do you think it's Brad is gone? They hire they promote from within. Their job is to appease Daryl and get Daryl the players that he wants. Does that mean that we're going to see players like Peltier, like Phillips, and some of the other younger players be moved for win now acquisitions?
Well, that would be a severe mistake, in my opinion. I mean,
it would be. But do you think that is where we're headed for the Flames?
I think there's a 60% chance of that. Yeah, but I also think that this, let's go down the history train here. This isn't the first time that this nonsense has happened with Daryl Sutter. Do we not remember the friction and mess that Daryl and Brent Sutter had when Brent Sutter was running this team as the coach? There were reports they couldn't talk to each other at the dinner table, and they had a massive amount of talent on that team. That was the year they got Jay Bouwmeester, and there was Robin Regier and Dion Phaneuf, and that was the big three on defense. And then there was the Olli Jokinen acquisition. Like, we've been down this road with Daryl before, and it turned into a disaster. I cannot, as much as you can love Daryl Sutter, like the track record here isn't enough. Like to me, I think you have to. I mean, everybody's clamoring. I don't think it's going to be a Kyle Dubas. I can't see that. I think they need. I don't know what they need as a general manager. Like, I can't kind of figure this. Like, to me, draft. I think you need to have a draft develop. I guess for me, it's a draft development model kind of general manager. That's what's going to work here, because ultimately with free agents, you are, as Eric Francis said, you're going to have to overpay them for them to come. There's not a lot that's appealing to going to Calgary in terms of work environment. Unfortunately, you're not playing with Connor McDavid. You're not playing with Austin Matthews. You don't have an ocean near you. It's not the same. So you need to have a draft and development and patient type of mind to kind of run that organization, and kind of someone that has been successful in a small market. And that's kind of I don't have a name, but the style, that's what's coming into my brain.
That is how you draft like it's not even draft develop, it's just develop. Like find young players, develop them, and like who are you built like. The way I look at the Flames, and unfortunately, I think because of the contracts that they've signed, they have to go sort of win now mode, because you've got Kadri, who's 32. He's got a handful of years left on a $7 million deal. You've got Weegar and Huberdeau, who are in their late 20s, who have signed long-term deals. And as much as you would like to be able to move on from those players if possible, I just don't see it happening. The cap's not moving much this year. Teams are not going to be taking on long-term contracts because they don't know what the cap is going to do at this point. If had the cap gone up and they know that there's going to be some more like the cap growth, they know the trajectory of that. I think there might be some more teams willing to do that, but not this summer. Not at this summer.
No. So then, in that the case, like this is where I guess the ultimate question comes out is what. I think we need to hear from Murray Edwards. Excuse me, sorry.
But what can he say that's going to help this along?
Well, at the very least, I think Murray Edwards needs to have some sort of come to Jesus moment here and recognize that what has happened here is incohesive, and you have two, face of the franchise type of players that are basically saying, I don't know if I want to come back. You've got another player who just came in and said, you need a new building. You need to straighten this organization out. That's flat out has to be your priority here. And
I think that, but I don't think him coming out and saying anything is going to, unless he comes out and says, I fired Daryl. We're either keeping Brad or we're moving on from Brad, and they come in, they have a new, then that makes sense. But if he's just coming out to put fires out, it doesn't work. Owners talking doesn't work.
I think this organization just looks Bush League though right now. Like, it looks poorly run. Like I can't like honestly, Sean, even from your perspective here, you cannot say that there was no more disappointed of a team than the Calgary Flames this year in terms of what was expected and what happened.
We all thought that they would be battling for the division.
Yep. And there's no bigger disappointed player this year than Jonathan Huberdeau. I don't know if you can debate that. Maybe there's
Jonathan Huberdeau went from being in the conversation for the Hart Trophy to being a 50-point player.
Yeah.
even get to,
Yeah.
like it's just
that's
55
such-
points in 79 games, and went from he dropped like 115 to 55 is a massive,
Man.
massive drop. And this isn't someone who just went from who was not like what like just had a big year. This is why I kept cautioning people on Kadri. Because he was always sort of like 0.75, 0.8 points per game, and he jumped up huge in that 1 year. And everyone thought that's where he was. No, he had a career year. Huberdeau did as well, but he was also, we're talking about a guy who 2017, 18, 69 points in 82 games. 18, 19, 92 points. 19, 20, 78 points in 69 games. 61 in 55 in 2021, and then 115 in 80. Like, so he got that jump, but he was already producing at basically a point per game or better for 3 seasons before that. So he had 4 full seasons of being a point per game or better, and then the season before that he was pretty close. And he just drops off the map.
Yeah.
And Dylan in the comments talking about could the Flames realistically afford Alex DeBrincat? That's not even a move I think they should be even exploring, because the issues are much deeper. They need to figure out what the identity of this team is. Yeah, you talked about that being an issue with the Canucks for the first half of the season, and I think that's the issue with the Flames. Been the issue with the Flames in the second half of the season. They did not know what they wanted to be, whether it's from Murray Edwards, Brad Treliving, Daryl Sutter, and the players. They could not figure out a cohesive identity top to bottom.
Nope.
So if you going forwards with the Flames, is what they need to do is figure that out first, and then start looking at making trades, acquisitions, signings, or whatever to fit that mold.
Yeah.
That being said, I think we completely underestimated the loss of Tkachuk and Gaudreau, and not just those players, but the chemistry that they had with Elias Lindholm and that line, which was an all-time line for that one season. When I was doing some research for my figuring out who I think should be up there for the Hart, I went back a few seasons looking at sort of how sort of things played out, and one of the things I've sort of gone on in terms of is that when for the Hart and the Norris, I looked at how the teams played when those players were on the ice compared to when the players were off the ice. And so I came up with a metric, sort of just basically even strength on ice production per 60, a comparative one. So you compare what the on ice production of the team when those players are on the ice versus when they're off the ice. And last season, the two highest in terms of that metric, the two highest players from that season, including this one as well, going back 5 years, Tkachuk and Gaudreau were miles ahead of anyone that I looked at in terms of top 10 scorers. It was insane. They were insane. And so you lose that line, and then everyone else is battling to figure out where they fit into the pecking order.
Yeah.
And when you have Huberdeau come in, the idea of plug and play with Huberdeau and Gaudreau made sense. You thought that you could create a second line with Kadri, but it just didn't work. And then you had the dysfunction of not knowing what the identity of the team was after that.
Well, I mean, I think, Lindholm, Gaudreau, and Tkachuk pretty much scored at will last year.
They did.
So I mean, to expect, I think it was unreasonable for me. I thought they would get off to a tough start because you had to develop that chemistry. But I was expecting this team to kind of grow into what we were going to see for a possible playoff run. And that just didn't happen. And like, and I think it was the toughest on Lindholm, obviously, because you're losing Gaudreau and Kachuk, and the players you're playing with, you're not clicking this. Like, I wouldn't, like, Tyler Toffoli had an amazing year, but I wouldn't say that Lindholm and Toffoli clicked. I wouldn't say that was like a dynamic line. That was Tyler Toffoli playing above expectation, Elias Lindholm playing under expectation, and they really didn't find a left winger for the two. And Kadri and Huberdeau didn't have any chemistry together. And I don't know what ultimately that was about. And then you had Backlund and Coleman that you stuck together, and I mean,
that worked. That was a good depth line.
Yeah.
The problem was like all the top end players outside of Toffoli underperformed.
Yeah. Exactly.
Whether it was Huberdeau, Kadri, Lindholm, Mangiapane, the players that you needed, the Flames needed to perform, did not, if they were going to be a playoff team, let alone a contender.
Yeah. And let's get it. Now that we're here, I don't think Andre Mangiapane got enough criticism this year. If there was one player that did not face the heat that I think deserved it a lot more, it was Andre Mangiapane. He went from 35 goals to 17. He signed an extension, and he got a praise. Now, it wasn't a Jonathan Huberdeau $10 million a year raise, but this is a 35-goal scorer that went down to 17. And I'm sorry, I got to tell you that I saw at times a very invisible Andre Mangiapane. I saw a guy that was not willing to take that puck to the net as much as he did last year. When he was on, the Flames were a much better hockey team and a lot tougher to play with. But it certainly wasn't enough for me to sit here and be enamored with Andre Mangiapane. He did not get nearly enough criticism. Like, there's a legit, like, in terms of the top nine, like, there was a ton of criticism for Milan Lucic and how he was playing and how much Trevor Lewis was playing. I would argue that if Andre Mangiapane was playing better, we would have probably seen a lot less of Lewis and Lucic. He's not getting nearly enough criticism. I do not think this was a good year for him. I think he needs to come back and be much better next year. And I'm not saying he needs to be 35 goals, but I don't think it's unrealistic for him to get 25 to 30.
No, they need him, but it's, to me, it's a drop in the pond if you're still not getting the proper performances from Lindholm and Huberdeau specifically.
No, that's fair.
Because I think Kadri was, in terms of production, was where I thought he'd be. Back to where he was for the majority of his career. Production-wise, Kev, because I know you have more, like, him not being a pain in big a pain in the ass as he needs to be, but production-wise, he's back to where he was for his most of his career.
Okay, but you put Kadri back to that. And you have, like, it just ultimately what happens here is you lose Gaudreau and Kachuk, which is over 100, close to 100 points. You have Elias Lindholm, that's goals production is down in half. You have Andre Mangiapane goal production that's down in half. You have Huberdeau that's down 65 points. Like, if even some of those are, even if it's down, if it's not as significant, like, if the drop off wasn't as significant, we're probably talking about them playing the Vegas Golden Knights, tomorrow or Tuesday. But, like, I think ultimately where I kind of got bothered is there was so many easy targets this year. Sutter, there was some fair target on. Lucic, I think there was some fair comments but I think the guy tried his best. Trevor Lewis did exactly what Trevor Lewis does. I don't have a problem with Trevor Lewis. Markstrom I think Markstrom is taking too much heat. And I think that there was just a few guys that didn't get enough. And I just think Andre Mangiapane was one of them.
Yeah, I think he's just overshadowed by the fact that you talked about Huberdeau not producing, Lindholm underproducing, and all that, right? I think it's just that he's like 3, 4, 5 down the totem pole of players that you were disappointed with.
Yeah. Let's get to Markstrom, because I think that there's two questions that are coming in my mind here. First of all, was it a tough first half of the year? In a lot of ways, yes, but there was also a lot of times that he didn't have the run support. One goal, I think there was at one point he had 11 one-goal games from his team only scored 11, and Vladar, while everyone was clamoring for him, he was getting the run support. Second half of the year, after his baby was born, Markstrom was just a much better player. Looked a lot refreshed. I think a lot of people are going to go look back on that goal against Nashville where he misplayed the puck, and he's going to get stinged for that. But there were a number of times, you go back to that Vancouver game on Saturday. It's 2-0, and he doesn't allow another goal. Now, Demko made some amazing saves, but Markstrom didn't allow another goal. I don't feel that Markstrom is worthy of the criticism for the most part of the second half of the year.
The problem with Markstrom is he's just wasn't making the saves at the times that the Flames needed him to.
Yeah.
Even when you talk about his second half being better, his second half save percentage was actually lower than his first half save percentage, at least 5-on-5. So it just wasn't a good year for him.
That's fair.
Maybe now that he's got the whole pregnancy situation out and he can move forwards, maybe next year he can have a bounce back. But I still think that, I know Devin will yell and scream at me for this, but I still think the Flames have a decision to make in net next year. Not necessarily about who's their starter, because I still think it's going to be Markstrom, but who's the backup? Because yes, they signed Vladar to an extension, but they've got Dustin Wolf. And at what point is he basically saying, I've done enough in the AHL, I'm ready to move up to the NHL, and if you aren't going to provide that to me, I'm not going to be happy. And that's someone you want to keep happy.
He was literally the best player in the AHL this year. Like, he's probably going to be the MVP. And if Devin's going to yell at you, he might yell at me. I think there's a legitimate argument that the Vladar is overrated. I see a little bit of David Riddick in him. I think
he's a fine 1B or a backup, but and especially going into next, how are you going to open up cap space to improve this team in front of your goaltending? Because going into next season, the Flames are already right up against the cap.
Yeah, they're in. Yeah,
you've got Kevin Rooney, who's taking up a little bit of the cap space just playing in the AHL because of the contract they signed him to. You don't know what's going on with Shillington. You need to figure out your blue line. You've got Uyghur's getting a massive pay bump. Right now the Flames have five defensemen making over $3 million going into next season. So, and in terms, I think they need to figure out the chemistry up front and figure out how they can make that work. Because I think the blue line's okay. The blue line's solid. Wasn't as good as many people made it out to be
Nope.
to begin the season, but it's solid. You've got, again, this is the Sean Broken Record part of the podcast where he talks about how the Calgary Flames blue line reminds him a lot of the Canucks blue line leading up into 2011 before they acquired Ehrhoff because they don't have a true puck mover. They don't have a true number one defenseman. They've got Anderson, Hannafin, and Uyghur who all do everything pretty good, but nothing spectacular. You've got Zadorov, who's that guy is an adventure to watch.
He's a character.
He's a character. You've got Tanev, who's I just don't know what's left in the tank there, unfortunately. But when he's on, he's still a very good defensive defenseman. But they don't have that game-changing defenseman that a lot of the top teams have. In terms of, I think pretty much most of them have. You look at the Rangers, they got Adam Fox, who's a game changer in that, as well as others. Dougie Hamilton with the Devils. You've got Hedman and Sergachev with Tampa. You've got Morgan Riley on Toronto. Hampus Lindholm having one hell of a season on Boston, but Charlie McAvoy is what stirs the drink in Boston on that blue line. You've got Ekblad in Florida, Heiskanen in Dallas, Makar and Devon Taves in Colorado, Doughty in LA. You've got Darnell Nurse and Evan Bouchard, and then the addition of Ekholm up front in up north in Edmonton. Josh Morrissey's had a hell of a season in Winnipeg, became that difference maker.
Yeah.
The Vegas has Pietrangelo and Shea Theodore, who can both move that puck and transport it and change the game that way. As good as Rasmus Anderson is at times at that, the consistency isn't there.
Yeah, he needs to take another step for sure. And you're right.
I don't know if he has it. I think he's like he reminds me of a combination of Bieksa and Hamhuis, where they're good defensemen, but they're not the game changers. They're not the defenseman that you need to be a contender in the NHL today.
I think he's close. I really do. I think that there's another step in him.
I've been wrong before on him, but I just look at him. I just don't quite see it.
That's fair.
Yeah, but but all that combined, I think it all comes down to me. It's figuring out how you. If we're going to draw a comparison between the two teams that we cover the most on this podcast, with the Canucks and Flames, the Canucks coming out of this season, despite the fact that it was an absolute tire fire of a season for most of it. There seems to be some optimism there because it feels like there's finally a cohesive direction top to bottom in the organization. The Flames need to find that, and if they don't, this is just the beginning of a bigger spiral down.
Well, the telling tale is how people talked about the players talked about Tocchet at that exit interview with the Canucks, and how people talked about Sutter at the media availability for the Flames. It was a much different tone.
Yep.
And I think that's telltale. And I think it's going to be a very interesting week in Flames land, and I think that there's some decisions that are going to be made very quickly, and I guess we'll see what happens. But this is going to turn out to be a more significant offseason for the Flames this year than last year. With your decisions on Gaudreau and Tkachuk, you basically are determining the direction of the organization this year on a number of different levels. Yeah. And I think that that's vital. And the one thing I still, I don't know what I don't follow the political Twitter in Calgary anymore, but um, however this has to happen, one of the priorities in this off season, and for the city of Calgary and the Calgary Flames ownership, is they got to resolve this building issue. I just I think it has to be a bigger priority than what it feels like right now. It feels like people are just pushing this away. But when a player says something like that, I think that Mackenzie Weegar did. I think that needs to be taken with a lot of weight. That's kind of where
I think
I'm at.
are. I think we will see by the end of the 2023 calendar, we will see a new arena deal be commenced and construction, if not started, close to starting. But I think we will see that. I think it's just we're grinding out and getting through some of the egos that are in play here.
Yeah.
On both sides.
Yep. No, I'm not taking a side. I'm just saying it has to get done. Yeah.
And I think it will. I still think it's time that we not only do but I also think it's time that we have some more business leaders step up.
Yep.
And help sports grow in Calgary a little bit more.
Yeah. Now there's still it's not just Murray Edwards running the ownership group. This is a group of people with the Flames, right? So,
he's just the face.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I just will leave it there.
Yeah.
In terms of the Flames, though, is there anything else we need to get into?
Till we know what's going on with Sutter and Treliving, I think we can leave it there.
Okay. But what I will say, if you're in Calgary, get out and watch the Wranglers in the playoffs. If you're in Abbotsford, get out and watch the Canucks in the AHL playoffs. Should be some fun hockey in the AHL playoffs, which should be good. Do we want to do the Hart Norris discussion, or do we want to get into the playoff preview here?
I want to get into the Hart and Norris conversation quickly here. So I did, as I said, I got into a ball of wine and started number crunching last night. So, yeah, like I said earlier, I was just thinking about what I want from defensemen and for the Norris and then just like MVP level players. I put together some criteria because I think there's a lot of talk, but we never really get into concrete discussions in terms of what's the criteria for both those awards, because especially with the Hart, when it's the most valuable player, it can be very subjective. For me, when I look at the Hart, you need to be in the top 10 of scoring, and historically that pans out. Not being on the playoff team does hurt your chances for the Hart, in my opinion. But one of the things I looked at is where, if you take out special teams, even strength play is where most of the game is played. And in terms of value, you want to show your value by scoring more goals and allowing less goals while you're on the ice. So, as I said earlier, when I was talking about the Flames and Tkachuk and Gaudreau, I just basically decided to look at even strength, goals for and against, when the players are on the ice versus when they're not, and then and then that creates a number based off of that. So if you look at this season, the top 10 in scoring includes the likes of Connor McDavid, Jason Robertson, Matthew Tkachuk, Elias Pettersson, Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Nikita Kucherov, David Pastrnak, Leon Draisaitl, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Now, when you take, and it's just those players, in terms of that stat that I talked about, which I basically just said, goals, the impact on goals during even strength, the highest impact that I have for that stat is Jason Robertson, where he was on the ice for per 60, right? It's per 60 because you have to have that to make it even, right? Otherwise, you have some players who play more and others who play less, and other teams who have based off of special teams. So that evens the playing field out. Jason Robertson at 1.31, a positive impact of 1.31 when he's on the ice. So when he's on the ice per 60, he's on the ice for 1.26 goals for than the rate of goals for when he's off the ice. And he allows less than he allows negative 0.05 goals against when he's on the ice compared to when he's off the ice. Meanwhile, you've got players like Nikita Kucherov, whose goal impact is 0.16. I know it sounds weird, but basically what I'm trying to create is just a stat that allows you. It's basically a per 60 plus minus even strength for these players. So Connor McDavid, great season, put up 153 points. His goal impact is 0.38. So if I'm basically just going off of that, my heart ballot, if I just look at that minus the fact minus playoff and all that, my three would be Jason Robertson, Matthew Tkachuk, and Elias Pettersson. They're the only three that are a goal have a positive. They're the top three in that stat. But you also have to look at how historic that McDavid season is. And a lot of his 153 points came on the power play. And when was the last time we saw 150 points in the season? So my top three for the Hart is McDavid with Robertson and Tkachuk as the runners up. I know, Kev, you were on the Draisaitl train. Are you still on the Draisaitl train?
1,000%.
Well, his impact, his even strength impact on that stat, he's 0.06. He has that out of the top 10 scorers, that is the lowest of them all.
Okay, so this would be my response. I think all of those guys that you said had great years. I think if it wasn't for McDavid's historic season, I think we would be having a very lengthy debate about the Hart Trophy overall. But to me, why I still stand with Draisaitl as second is just something a buddy of mine said at work. Is an Oilers fan. He basically said for the last quarter of the year, it's been Draisaitl that's been driving the play, not McDavid. He literally said it that Draisaitl has been the better player. And I know that you're not counting power play points, but this is an historic power play with a team that is in the top 2 or 3 in terms of regulation wins this year, and we're one of the better second half teams of the year. I just can't I mean, Connor McDavid had an incredible year, but I think what Leon Draisaitl has done has allowed Connor McDavid to be the player that he has been.
But has Connor McDavid allowed Leon to be the player he's been?
No. I think
that's where I think you're way off base on that there, Kev. And it's just as good as that power play is. There's a reason there's 3 Edmonton Oilers in the top 10 of scoring, and it's because of that power play.
And you have to,
and that's fantastic. But
that's
majority
of
the play,
Sean. It's historic.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But guess what? 150 points,
31.6% power play. That has never happened.
I just look at it and say, yes, great, awesome, historic, fantastic. Majority of the play is on 5-on-5. and you've got Jason Robertson, who's having a hell of a season and is driving the bus down in Dallas.
I'm not disputing, if the best line in the league right now is Hintz, Robertson, Pavelski. Wouldn't dispute that. I'm not I don't want to sit here and downplay. Like, I don't think Jason Robertson is a good player, or I don't think that Matthew Tkachuk has had a great year.
Well, we're basically just saying who's the best of the best,
right? But to me, it's McDavid, Draisaitl, and I'm still battling with Rantanen, Pasternak, Robertson as my 3, 4, 5. And kind of in that. I mean, you have to consider David Pasternak had 60 goals. That's incredible in and of itself. I mean, you talked about Jason Robertson, but the thing that people are forgetting about Mikko Rantanen is there was no Cale Makar for a lot of the year. There was no Nathan McKinnon for a lot of the year. He didn't have
McKinnon missed 11 games.
But that's still a chunk that Rantanen had to kind of take over himself. And there was also no Nazem Kadri around. So that's why I
still have McKinnon ahead of Rantanen on my ballot too.
That's fair. That's fair.
There's a reason that power play is so historic, and that's because they've got that 3-headed monster. And when you put them all together and put 5-on-5, Leon Draisaitl's doesn't provide enough enough in terms of he's got this, he allows 0.82 goals against per 60 more than when when he's not on the ice, and that's the second worst amongst the top 10 in terms of scoring, behind Nikita Kucherov.
Do you want me to tweet this to Jim Matheson, by the way?
Go for it. I don't care.
Get Oiler fans all over you, as they were last year all over me. So,
I'm not saying Leon, I think Leon's probably in the top, will probably end up finishing the top 5. But I just think it's when you have McDavid having such a historic season, how can you say and them having such a historic power play, but when you look at their 5-on-5 contributions, he's not up there with the rest of them.
Okay, that's fair. That's your criteria, and that's okay. I still would have. I think, to me, it's McDavid, Draisaitl, but it's going to be an interesting vote, and on that. But I think I'm still seeing people on Twitter today talking about the Norris and still trying to find out who they ultimately can't decide. And I mean, this is ultimately going to come down to, is Erik Karlsson's 100-point season historic enough to give him the Norris Trophy? That's basically what we're debating at this point.
I don't have him as my winner. He's freaking close, but I just don't quite have him there. I have Adam Fox as it, because I use that same metric, and then I also looked at penalty kill. For me, a defenseman needs to be good in all 3 zones, both offensive, transition, and defensive, to be considered the Norris. And if you're not playing on the penalty kill, you cannot be considered a Norris Trophy candidate, other than if you have done something historic. And Erik Karlsson has, so he is in there for me. I have him second. But what Adam Fox has done is really good this year. And I don't think there has not been enough talk about it.
Yeah, I don't have. I'm going to sound horrible, but I can't look at San Jose's ultimate. You mean for me on defense, goals against has to play a figure in it, as well as playoffs. And I just, as much as that's been a wonderful offensive year, I can't get past his defensive struggles. to put it politely, and so I can't give it to him, and I can't put him in the top 3. I would probably go at this point a Fox, Dougie Hamilton, Charlie McAvoy. I think are the top 3 right now. I mean,
See, if you're going with a Boston defenseman, neither of them are in the top 10 in points for defensemen. That's another criteria for me. But I would go Hampus Lindholm over McAvoy for this season. But again, Dougie Hamilton, as good as a season as he's had, he doesn't penalty kill in New Jersey. And for me, that's huge. If you want to be the best defenseman in the NHL, consider that for a season, you have to play in all situations. If you're not playing in all situations and you're not doing anything historic, and he hasn't done anything historic this year, I can't consider you a Norris Trophy candidate.
Okay. I mean, I will be always one that would try to find a way to get Jacob Slavin somewhere on my ballot, but that's just me. And
again, I think as much as I love Jacob Slavin, I just don't think, again, in today's day and age, to be considered the best defenseman, you have to have be good, like really good in all 3, and part of that is offensive, and he's not. That's not his game. I really wish we got the best defensive defenseman. Or forward award. I wish we could split it up defensively as well.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of candidates. I think Jared Spurgeon didn't get enough credit this year. I think Alex Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore had pretty good years.
Again, Theodore doesn't penalty kill. Never has.
Heiskanen, I think, can have be in that conversation. Dallas
that goals impact stat. He's a negative. So that's like he's had a good season, but he needs his offensive impact when he's on the ice is not there. Even though he's put up 73 points, so a lot of that came on the power play. By the way, my third is Quinn Hughes, based off of the he's penalty kills. His impact when he's on the ice versus when he's off the ice is insane. It's the best of the top 10 top end defensemen. But the lack of being in the playoffs is something that I think it is a fair thing to say that he can't win it, but I think he needs to be in that conversation for in like say 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's a tough competition, and I think for the Norris is going to be it's an interesting debate in terms of that. I liked what I mean. I think Tyler made some interesting points. I'll be interested to hear what Devin has to say about this, because I think there may be some people that think Morgan Riley deserves this.
He hasn't had the season though, right?
Yeah, we'll get into this when we get into the playoff preview. But
and just so for you, Kev, in the 2020-2021 season, which was like the season that we usually don't really want to talk about because it was that weird divisional thing. Based off of the what I looked at, Dougie Hamilton got absolute fucking robbed of that Norris. It should not have been Adam Fox.
Oh, I think everyone agrees it shouldn't have been Adam Fox. I think that was an entire weird situation here, but yeah,
that and the amount of Victor Hedman's been the second runner up for the past 4 seasons, and when I went through it, he gets it once for me. Like it just feels like people are like, oh, it's Victor Hedman. He deserves a vote.
Yeah. Well, that should lead us into our playoff preview here. We'll get into this now. And let's start with the one that let's start with this one. Let's start with Tampa Bay, Toronto, because I think this is the one that I think everybody's been fascinated about. This has been planned for months. It's sort of like this wrestling build where we know that the match is coming. Here it is. We're here now. Let me ask you this question. if Tampa loses, what happens to Tampa? Is a coach or GM job on the line if they lose?
No.
Is there significant changes coming in Tampa if they lose?
I think they'll take a look at what I don't think significant, because what would be significant?
Are they thinking about a rebuild, retool? Are they in the
God,
world?
no.
Okay.
They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 skaters and Vasilevsky signed forever.
Yeah.
They've got Eric Chernak signed at 5.2 for a while. They've got Mikhail Sergachev at 8.5 signed for a while, which is actually I think it's going to turn out to be a good deal for them. Nick Paul signed for a long time. Anthony Cirelli signed for a long time. Braden Point signed for a long time. Nikita Kucherov is signed for another 5 years, and that's the shortest contract of that group, as well as Vasilevsky signed for a long time too. They're not set up for a rebuild or a retool. They're just going to continue to plug away with this group.
Meanwhile, in Toronto, they made all these significant changes at the trade deadline. There's a coach and GM whose entire job is on the line if they don't win. There's an entire nation watching either for them to cheer to win or laugh at them if they lose. The entire pressure of this series is on Toronto. There's no pressure on Tampa to win. I guess, to me, I think that if this was the year that Toronto was going to do it, this would be the year. But I almost wonder if they did too many changes. And my brain and my gut tells me to pick Toronto, but something is just,
take Tampa in 7 just for the pain.
I ultimately might have to do it like this. I think when it comes down to it, there's just, I think that you can't play with this much pressure, with this much expectation on one round. And I think it just makes it easier for Tampa they can take a loss and go, oh, well, okay, we lost. We'll be back for game 2 or game 3, right? Like they've been through this war where Toronto, every single move is going to be evaluated. And that's where I struggle with picking Toronto. Like, I think it goes 7. I think part of my brain wants to go Toronto, but that's the one intangible is that Tampa has. There's no pressure on them to win, and I don't think Toronto made their team good enough to beat Tampa. I think they overdid it.
Well, I think it'll come down to goaltending for Toronto. Is Ilya Samsonov good enough?
And if he's not healthy,
well, I think he is. I think they were toying around with that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. There was a lot of mind games and AHL tryouts and cap circumvention and all of that sort of stuff. I agree. But my God, if he's not 100%.
Yeah, I think I just can't wait to watch it, honestly. You've got they're both like Toronto was 5-on-5 this year, was pretty damn good. They're a plus 42 in goals. Tampa is a plus 13. Toronto had the better team save percentage on the 5-on-5 versus Tampa. All the stats say it should be Toronto, but this is literally their dragon to slay. And if they don't, like, we're gonna see, like, you think Calgary's offseason could be interesting? Toronto's could be even more. Because they acquired O'Reilly, whose contract is up. They acquired Noel Achari, whose contract is up. They've got William Nylander and Austin Matthews have 1 year left on their deals. Tavares and Marner have 2 years left on their deals. Like they have, other than Morgan Riley, they're most of their contracts look like they could be movable if they want to retool, rebuild, reconstruct this roster.
Yeah. Do you know what this kind of reminds me of a little bit? The 2011 Canucks, where I think there's a lot of parallels here where, if this is the dragon that they need that they've got 2 dragons to slay, and one is Tampa, and then the next round may be another dragon that they have to slay. So, and I guess in terms of that, I don't see Florida giving Boston. I can't see Florida winning 4 games against Boston. I know that everyone is excited about this rat battle. I have yet to be proven there's no scientific evidence that Matthew Tkachuk is a playoff player.
Kev, no. Are you still heartbroken?
That was, I mean, it was shit. Like it was complete garbage. Okay, so like it's been a consistent lack of playoff appearance. So, if he steps up and plays the way that he did for the most of the second half of the year, I think they could give Boston a push, but I can't see them winning 4 games against Boston. I think everybody is hoping for this upset because it causes chaos. But I just think Boston's too focused right now, and they're just too complete in terms of a 7-game series to be beaten by Florida.
The President's Trophy curse is real.
It is, but I don't think Florida is the one to curse it, though.
No, I expect Boston to win it, and at most 6 games. I just want chaos. I want to see the 2 biggest rats in the league, rat it up against each other. I think it'd be hilarious, great entertainment, and we get John and John calling it.
Yes, it's Garrett and Shorthouse calling that one. And then you also got underrated rats, Garnet Hathaway. You got underrated rats, Sam Bennett. There's a lot of rats in this series. There's Ryan Longberg.
Florida is not a nice team to play against. They last season they bullied a lot of teams, and they still can with the roster that they have.
Yeah. A guy that has been severely underrated this year in Florida, I will say, is Brandon Montour. He has stepped up.
He was in the top 10 of defensemen in points this year. But I think the most underrated defenseman on Florida is Gustav Forsling.
Yeah, former Vancouver Canuck.
Former Vancouver Canuck draft pick, yep. I don't think he even played a game for the Canucks, though.
Yeah.
He was traded to Chicago for Adam Clendenning.
Oh, one of those. So that leaves us with the Metro. It's still weird that we don't have a Crosby or an Ovechkin in the playoffs. We're in a new era. But let's talk about the funner series, which will be New York, New Jersey.
The atmosphere is going to be fucking fantastic.
I think this is the best. I think this and Dallas, Minnesota might be the 2 wildest series. I think these 2 are going to be followed closely by LA, Edmonton, but this New York, New Jersey series is going to be bonkers. You've got these young kids with a guy that has gotten a team to the Stanley Cup final in Lindy Ruff against a team that put, everyone had the rebuild in there, but, they put all their chips in. They got Tarasenko. They got Patrick Kane. I just think in terms of blue line to blue line, I have to go with the Rangers. I think in terms of goaltending, I have to go with the Rangers. And in terms of experience, you have to go with the Rangers. I've been very high on New Jersey, but I think ultimately I got to go with the Rangers pulling this one out in a very lengthy, angry series.
Yeah, I think that's why the Rangers will win it. I think you'll see the likes of Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, and the young forwards on New Jersey. It's going to be a bit of a learning experience for them. So I think we're going to see the Rangers prevail out of this one, but I hope it's a 6 to 7 game series because the atmosphere at both arenas, at both barns is going to be electric.
Yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. I don't think there's going to be a lot of exciting hockey being played with Carolina and the Islanders.
That's going to be a war, but it's just going to be a boring war.
Yeah. It'll be like that Simpsons soccer episode. Just the puck is moving an inch. Are you ready for this? Because I'm going with the upset.
Well, I was saying if there's an upset in the East, this is where it's going to happen.
I think the Islanders are going to win. I think because they have the edge in goaltending, and I think that injury to Svechnikov is significant. The fact that they didn't really add at the trade deadline, Carolina didn't, and they haven't had a lot of playoff success in front of them. So, and the Islanders have. I'm going to go with the Islanders. I'm picking the Islanders.
The Islanders sounds like the Islanders are going to get Barzal back, maybe not to begin the series, but part way through, if it's not to begin it. I think we will. If there's an upset in the East, that's going to be because I don't. Yes, the Devils are the higher seed against the Rangers, but it's basically a toss up for me. I wouldn't consider it like that an upset. You got Sorokin in net with the Islanders. They've got Noah Dobson, Pulak, and Pelech on the blue line. That's formidable. And then you've got if Barzal can be healthy, him and Horvat on the line has shown in a short sample size has shown to have chemistry. And then you've got players who know how to win. They've gone to the conference final once, maybe, but they've got the playoff experience. So it's too bad for Carolina because I think they've done everything right. I don't think they needed to add, but losing Svechnikov after the deadline really hurt their chances there. So yeah, if I'm there too, Kev. I'm with you with the Islanders. I just think that Carolina, the loss of Svechnikov is too big of a loss, and the Islanders as a team are a veteran team that know how to win in the playoffs.
Yeah. And then we go in the West. Where do we? Let's start with the Minnesota Dallas series.
Again, they played once before, but this time I think there's some characters on this team, and they both have players who are willing to get down and dirty.
Oh, this will be a very nasty series. But ultimately, I have to go with Dallas here. I think you have the experience of Jake Ottinger from last year. Not only that, it's just hard to beat Joe Pavelski in a playoff series. And you got Jason Robertson in a Hart conversation. I don't think the Wild's center depth is enough to do it. They are fantastic defensively, but Dallas is willing to go either way. I'm going with Dallas in this one.
Kaprizov is back. If he's healthy, that's a big game changer for Minnesota. And you've got Matt Boldy, who is not afraid to get down and dirty. You've got Ryan Hartman, and they've got. I think I like Minnesota in this one. They have the special sauce this year in terms of it, and as good as Ottinger has been and was last year against Calgary. I like the makeup of the Minnesota Wild, and I think it's going to be. I think this will be a drag 'em out series. but I think it's going to be the Wild.
Okay, well, we disagree on this one. Colorado, Seattle. I think it's been a fun year in Seattle. I think it's great they're getting in the
Bye-bye.
playoffs. But yeah, unfortunately, you are facing the wrong team in the first round. I know they don't have Gabriel Landeskog. I don't think it matters. They're just too deep. They're just too talented.
When
and
you've
I
got you've got Makar, you've got McKinnon, you've got Rantanen. I don't see Seattle, and then Seattle's suspect goaltending.
And no Burakovsky this series either.
Yeah, I just don't see any chance. I think this might be the quickest series.
I could see it. But Seattle plays tough on the road, so that makes it a little bit interesting to me that it may go a little longer. But I don't see Colorado losing more than 2 games of this. I think it would be so. But yeah, I have Colorado. Winnipeg, Vegas. I think this is a fascinating series in and of itself because Winnipeg basically collapsed, kind of found their way back, and held on to a playoff by basically the hair of their chinny chin chin. Vegas have used 9,632 goaltenders. They're going to find a way to get Mark Stone walk back into the lineup in cap circumvention mode. But I'm taking the upset in this one. I think Winnipeg will win this series. I think you've got Connor Hellebuck playing at a Connor Hellebuck type of level. I think getting themselves into this playoffs is probably a way for them to refresh the Winnipeg Jets. I see the upset here. I really do. I think Winnipeg is going to beat Vegas.
Okay, I'll say what I said again with Vegas. To begin the season, it comes down to goaltending. If they can get the goaltending that they can get good goaltending, I think they win it. If the goaltending falters, Winnipeg has enough offensive skill to capitalize and make that upset.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Winnipeg on this one.
They've got the game breaker in Hellebuck to win them. If there's a goaltender out there that can win a series, in the West, it's him.
Yeah. And finally, Edmonton, LA, in a rematch for last year that went 7 games.
But this time with the extra spice of Drew Doughty.
Yes. Some new characters. Matthias Ekholm has entered the chat. Stuart Skinner has entered, and his mustache has entered the chat as well. Kevin Fiala has entered the chat. Jonas Corpusalo has entered the chat. Both of these teams are better than last year. I don't see this going 7. I think the Oilers take this in 6. I think the Oilers are a better team right now. I think they're playing at a very confident level. I just ultimately, when it comes down to special teams and scoring, the Oilers do have the advantage.
But it's playoffs, Kev.
I know it's playoffs. I know there's Adrian Kempe. I know there's Anze Kopitar. I know there's Drew Doughty. But do the Kings have enough scoring to win 4 games against the Oilers?
Yes.
Are you taking the Kings?
I think it's the Oilers in 7, but I think the Kings have the ability to pull this off.
Okay.
The Oilers are, as we talked about earlier, they've got a historic power play. They're still pretty good 5-on-5. But if they don't, if the playoffs get called the way we expect the playoffs to be called, that power play gets negated a lot. The Kings have 2 very good lines, including one with one of the best shutdown centers in the game in Philip Deneau, who's going to be right in McDavid and Draisaitl's hip pocket as much as he can. You've got Anze Kopitar, who's a former Selke winner, on the other line. They match up well.
Yeah, I'm still concerned about the scoring though.
Again, I agree. I think, but I think they don't need if they can find a way to stay out of the penalty box, they've got a chance. And a good one, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then if Corpusalo can stand on it, I mean, the one other thing is I would give the goaltending edge to the Kings. You know, I mean, Corpusalo has had playoff success. Skinner, this is going to be his first playoff experience, and then you've got Jack Campbell backing him up, who does have playoff experience as well, but he hasn't won a round. That would be, if I'm the Oilers, that's still the big concern there. But I think their offensive game is better overall. And yeah, so I got the Oilers winning that one.
They split their season series.
Yeah, it's been even.
So I look at that and I think they've got the matchup. Then when you match up well, you don't need as much offense.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting for sure. And
you've got Drew Doughty, who knows who's won a cup. You've got Anze Kopitar, who's won a cup. Philip Deneau's been to the Stanley Cup final. They all know, and they gave him fits last year without Doughty.
They did.
And you've got Quentin Byfield, who's an absolute beast, and he's on one of the top lines.
Yeah, he's quietly becoming a really good player. Devin mentioned that in the last podcast too. He's quietly becoming.
I think it's as big of an offensive juggernaut that Oilers team is, and they are the favorite, and I probably am still taking them. I don't count out the Kings just because they don't have the same offense.
Okay. It's going to be a very interesting play. All 8 of these series have some very fascinating trends and tricks to them. So I think this is going to be a very interesting watchable playoff.
Oh, I cannot wait. By the way, I do have an update from Devin. He's still doing okay. He says, "Fuck you" to Dylan. He is doing all right. He's already getting a little nervous about the Leafs in the playoffs. But yeah, I cannot wait to start for the chaos to start tomorrow. I don't work tomorrow, so I can watch from post to pillar to post, whatever that saying is. Did I get it backwards the first one?
It's pillar to post.
Pillar to post. I'm gonna watch that all tomorrow, and it's gonna be fantastic because this is the first round of the NHL playoffs is the best. It is the best. Nothing beats it in my opinion in terms of sports.
It's gonna this year there's gonna be a lot of fun. But
because you got the Battle of the Hudson, you've got Rap Battle, Carolina Islanders. Yes, it's good. It might be a little bit boring in terms of offense, but I still think it's going to be a fun series to watch for at times. Then you've got the microscope on Toronto.
Yeah.
And Edmonton. Let's be honest, the microscope on Edmonton because they got to the conference finals last year. You don't have too much left in Draisaitl's prime. So
it is definitely going to be interesting for sure. But let's leave it there. We will, if things happen, we will update you. We'll talk about it here. And stay tuned. I think the Flames are in for a very interesting offseason. The Canucks are in for a very interesting offseason, probably for different reasons, but it'll be an interesting offseason anyway around the league. But how do we follow you, Sean?
I am BeardedConnect03 on Twitter.
Devin, the as aforementioned Devin is GordHowe09, Tyler TNOBLE, Christian Schneid's SCHNAIDZ. I am KEVOLE, Shifts and Pucks on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you very soon. Bye for now. I hit the... There we are. Okay. Bye for now.